to please keep yourself muted unless you're called upon to speak. And then for those of us here in the chambers, please make sure that you mute your phones. I just muted mine. All right, everybody ready? The City of Glendale Common Council is now in session. I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Kennedy,
Here.
Alderwoman Vukovic, Alderman Doherty, Alderman Gelhard,
Here.
Alderman Bailey,
Here.
Alderman Schmelzling,
Here.
Alderwoman Shaw.
Thank you. Next up is public comment. Glendale residents, business owners, and property owners are invited to speak to the council on items that are not on tonight's agenda, but are within the city's ability to regulate or control. Is there anyone wishing to speak to a non-agenda item? Not seeing anybody in the council chamber standing up. If there's one person on Zoom, if anybody wants to speak to a non-agenda item, you can unmute and state your name. All right, we'll move on. Consent agenda has only two items: adoption of the minutes of our last meeting and accounts payable. Can I get a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please?
Second.
Moved by Vukovic, seconded by Doherty. Without objection, we'll consider it adopted. I don't see any objections to consent. All right. Moving on to the public hearing. We have two public hearings tonight. First one is a public hearing regarding an ordinance amending and renaming Title 13, Article K, accessory uses and structures, fences and hedges, portable storage structures, and donation drop-off boxes. This has to do primarily with changes to fences. This has already been to the Plan Commission. They already held a public hearing. I don't believe anybody came to the public hearing at the Plan Commission. But now we are back at the Common Council, and tonight is our public hearing. So unless there's any questions, anybody needs any clarification from members of the council? I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in the public hearing regarding the ordinance amending and renaming Title 13, Article K, accessory uses and structures, and this has primarily to do with some changes to fences. Is there anyone wishing to speak in the public hearing? Not seeing anybody raising their hands in the council chambers. If you're joining us on the Zoom and you want to speak in the public hearing, you can unmute and state your name. Okay, second call. Anyone wishing to speak in the public hearing? And third and final call. Anyone wishing to speak in the public hearing? All right, I'll entertain a motion from a member of the council to close public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Gelhard, seconded by Schmelzling. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Public hearing is now closed. We have a second public hearing also noticed for this evening. This is a public hearing for a map amendment and general development plan for AH&S Realty. Doing business as Casa de Corazon. This is a childcare center and preschool at 4600 North Port Washington Road. This has also already been to the Plan Commission. They held their public hearing and the Plan Commission recommended it back to us. Tonight is our public hearing, so I'll now open the public. So I'll ask, is there any comments or questions from members of the council before I open the public hearing? All right, seeing none. The public hearing is now open on 4600 North Port Washington Road. This is for a map amendment and a general development plan for a proposed daycare and preschool. Anyone wishing to speak in the public hearing? If there's anyone joining us on the Zoom that wishes to speak, you may unmute and state your name and address. Second call, anyone wishing to speak in the public hearing? And third and final call for testimony in the public hearing. All right, public hearing having been properly noticed and published, and we've had it open at the time that was indicated. I would now, no one has appeared, so I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second. By Doherty, seconded by Bailey. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now closed. We'll move on to our new business. The first business item is an ordinance amending and renaming Title 13, Article K, accessory uses and structures, fences and hedges. We already had the public hearing tonight. Mr. Fellows, is there anything you want to add to what we've already done over the last like 3 or 4 months between here and the Plan Commission?
No, I'm just here if you have any questions.
All right. So we have before us an ordinance amending and renaming Title 13. Can I get a motion to adopt, please?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Gelhardt, seconded by Schmelzling. Is there any discussion from members of the council? All right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the new ordinance amending and renaming Title 13 regarding fences and hedges, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next then is we had the public hearing on the proposed daycare and child and preschool at 4600 Northport Washington Road. And so before us is consideration of a map amendment and a general development plan. This has already been sent over by the Plan Commission. Mr. Fellows, did you want to add anything or are you just here for questions in case there are some?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any questions from members of the council? All right, can we get a motion then to approve the map amendment and the general development plan for AH&S Realty at 4600 Northport Washington Road? Moved by Vukovich, seconded by Bailey. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is a referral to the Planning and Architectural Review Commission for a zoning map amendment from R7 Residence District to R7A Residence District at 902 West Eula Court in the R7 Residence District and Residential Land Use Classification. Mr. Fellows.
This is an item for you. It is a referral to the Architectural and Planning and Architectural Review Commission. Essentially, the property owner has a lot that's about 80 feet long. When the property was originally platted pre-founding of the city of Glendale, when it was in the town of Milwaukee, it was actually 2 lots. At that point, a house was built on both of the lots. So the property line went through the house. He purchased the house a number of years ago. It was in a dilapidated state, and he tore it down. Prior to his purchasing of the house, it actually had been combined into 1 lot. So he has 1 80-foot wide lot. The rest of the lots along that particular street are much more narrow. What he'd like to do is build essentially a duplex that would be condominiumized. So it would remain 1 80-foot lot. But you'd have 2 units that he would create a condominium document for. And so in order to do that, you can't do that in the R7. He'd like to do it in the R7A. There are 2 parcels on Eula Court currently zoned R7A, and a large portion of the north side of Glendale Avenue is also zoned R7A. It's really the only part of the community where you find a lot of R7As. So
Those duplexes, is that what R7A is?
yes, yeah, single family or duplexes. And they're actually, interestingly, in the current R7 in that area on Eula Court, there are duplexes that are essentially non-conforming because they're in the single family category. So it's a little bit of a mix over there. So because there had been some rezonings on these other random parcels, we told him if he wanted to apply, he could go through the process. So and then once the rezoning would go through, he would still have to go to the Planning and Architectural Review Commission for any site improvements in the building design, that kind of thing. He hasn't gotten to that point yet of designing it, but he'd like to just see if he could. So tonight's, if it pleases you all, it would be a recommendation to the Planning and Architectural Review Commission to provide you a recommendation.
All right, thank you. And in your opinion, this isn't different than anything that's around it. There's a number of other properties around it that are very similar, either with duplexes or.
Yeah, not for this particular area of the community. It would be fairly fitting.
We just want to be careful that we're not doing spot zoning. So this would sort of conform to the other uses around it.
Yeah, that one's kind of an interesting one because there's already these other isolated parcels, and then there's the chunk on Glendale. So it's kind of, there's already a pattern happening. It probably at some point might be good to reevaluate all of Eula Court and try to figure out which ones are duplexes and which are single family, and actually determine like maybe this entire neighborhood just should be R7A.
Okay,
I mean, it's a possibility that probably is a worthwhile exercise.
thank you. Any questions from members of the housing?
I was just going to say, if it used to be 40 feet wide with
look at the other ones that are separate homes, why isn't that the kind of default action here to just subdivide it again and then just put two individual
don't-
condos?
We
on
don't
them?
currently allow lots that's narrow.
Okay,
So it's very interesting. Usually in your zoning code, the lot size relates to the zoning district you're in. In Glendale, there are three types of lot sizes. Those that are south of Silver Spring, those that are Silver Spring to essentially the railroad track just north of Bender, and those lots north of Bender. So they're geographically defined lot sizes and lot widths, but then the zoning is a completely different thing. It's kind of atypical of your traditional zoning. And I tell you the thought process from my understanding, it's been that way probably since the 50s.
I was just looking at the map and the other ones of narrow and long, and it seemed like those were conforming, or are those also not?
They would
really?
all be non-conforming too.
They would be, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that helps.
Some communities will actually, when they rewrite their zoning codes, they choose to go to a, if you're developing greenfields, you can have those standards. A lot of communities have realized that you're creating a lot of non-conforming, so they try to basically create more of a contextual zoning format. So it's, if you're doing redevelopment or you're in existing neighborhoods, it's more on the context than it is some idealized standard that might have come from previous decades. It's a concept, but
That answers my question. So yeah, I don't want to stand in the way of progress. Thank you.
Doherty?
Neighbors will still have a chance to weigh in on this, right?
yes, so this is a rezoning request. So what will happen is there is a optional public hearing, which the planning commission usually will trigger at their level. There'll be a public hearing at your level. So there's a potential of either 1 to 2 public hearings and the public meetings to go through that. So everyone within about 200 feet will be notified. So it should be most of the block.
All right, any other questions? All right, can we get a motion then to refer this over to the Planning and Architectural Review Commission, please?
So move.
Moved by Doherty.
Second.
Seconded by Gelhard. Any further discussion? All in favor of referring the rezoning request to the Planning and Architectural Review Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is a referral to the Planning and Architectural Review Commission for a zoning map amendment from B1 A1 Local Business District to PD Plan Development District for Phoenix JCR Glendale Industrial Investors at 5055 North Lydell Avenue. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Fellows.
Thank you. So Phoenix owns this complex at 5055 Lydell. Most of it's underutilized. They are looking to rezone it from a B1 A1 to a planned development district with the intent that they could allow for a corporate headquarters as well as showroom and some other types of facilities on a portion of the property. That's sort of all kind of detailed in the report. This is a planned development district proposal, so very similar to the rezoning we had just before. This would be a referral to the Planning and Architectural Review Commission. They would go through their process. This does require a general development plan, a specific development plan, would end up with a development agreement at the end. I do know that there are 2 from all if you have any questions for them.
Any questions for Mr. Fellows or for the representatives from Phoenix? All right, so the recommendation of staff at this point is to refer it to the Planning and Architecture Review Commission. Can I get a motion to that effect, please? Moved by Alderwoman Vukovic, second by Alderman Bailey. Any further discussion? All in favor of referring to the Planning and Architecture Review Commission for rezoning for 5055 North Lydell Avenue, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Fellows. All right, next up is review and possible action on an authorization to execute a state municipal maintenance agreement for the maintenance of underdeck lighting on I-43 bridge at Glendale Avenue.
I can take this one,
I saw Charlie marching up there.
but if you don't want to.
Go
So,
ahead, Carl.
thank you, Mayor Kennedy. So this agreement specifically outlines that the city of Glendale would be responsible for the maintenance of the underdeck lighting that Director of Public Works Imig was very successful in having installed at a later date after the construction was underway. We had some resident feedback regarding the light underneath the bridge. And to their point, they were absolutely correct. So the underdeck lighting has been installed. This agreement would just say that we are responsible for the maintenance and the electricity of said lighting once it's in and working.
All right, thank you. Questions? Yes, Alderman Shaw.
This is just strictly for the lighting itself, not for the maintenance of the bridge, to make sure.
Yeah, that is correct. It does say other things in there like snow plowing and other and sidewalks that are underneath the bridge. So it would, in my estimation, correct, Charlie? The maintenance of it, we are responsible for the snow removal on the sidewalks below the bridge, correct?
May I ask why that is?
Can you answer that question?
We would be bleeding the road anyway in the snow. And so this is just a matter of adding that piece of sidewalk, right? Okay.
Sidewalk already exists.
Right.
Underneath. It's just being reinstalled, I guess, as part of the project. So, yeah. Really nothing, I'm sorry,
See what you're doing.
correct. It's just wider configuration. I mean, the new bridge now is wider than it used to be. And there's the MSE walls on the side of it and everything. So allowed natural light is no longer enough to light the roadway underneath. So at the request of Alderman Vukovic and a resident, I put forth the question to WISTOT. So they are installing underdeck lighting at no cost to the city. We will assume the cost of maintenance and power afterward.
Sidewalk has always been our responsibility, correct?
Correct. As well as the roadway, the clearing of the roadway underneath.
They were just essentially putting what we already have as our practice into writing to make sure that we're the ones that are still cleaning the street. And the
Correct.
sidewalk.
This is similar to the other SMMAs you have approved.
So you didn't give
previously.
up anything in the negotiation for this?
Well, I added in the approach to the alleyway. That was
Okay.
extra. So I figured, why not, right? If you keep asking, they can say no, but why not ask?
Okay. Yep, Alderman Vukovic, your mic's not on.
I have to give Charlie some kudos as we were trying to get some of the stuff. He added things in to make sure lighting got in. And I mean, usually they charge for that stuff but he did a really good job of adding some stuff the city probably would have eventually put in, but getting them to do it. So this is a no-brainer for us because that was expensive to put that lighting under there, but it was super dark. Good job, Charlie.
Thank you.
One
Okay.
last question is, because I didn't read it verbatim, my question is it LED lighting, so it's cost effective?
Yes,
Thank you.
I think everything is LED.
Pretty,
lighting.
yeah, pretty much.
Just making sure,
That's
because
a. I
you
think
never
that's
know,
a Question that everything is now.
just making sure.
All right, can I get them? Do we got a motion already, right? Okay, this one we did.
moved.
Okay. Moved by Doherty, seconded by Vukovic. It was the last one, the Vukovic. Okay, this one is Doherty, the Vukovic. Got it. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of approving or authorizing to execute the state municipal maintenance agreement for the underdeck lighting at the I-43 bridge at Glendale Avenue, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, next item is stop signs at the intersection of West Clovernook Lane and North Bittersweet Lane.
Okay. Alderman Gelhard received a request from residents to install traffic control at the intersection of Clovernook and Bittersweet. For safety reasons. Apparently, they have some children that live in the yard and they're worried about people speeding by. This is a three-way uncontrolled stop. And Alderman Gelhard requested that we put stop signs to make it a three-way stop. The cost would be $1,238, and we would need to amend the ordinance 10-114 to include those stop signs.
Comments or questions from members of the council? Yeah, Alderman Schmelzen, go ahead.
These three-way stops are always a little problematic. I just know I have one at the top of Green Tree and people tend to run through it, and it actually seems to make things a little bit more hazardous from what I've read and such. Was it entertained to put just a single stop sign on Clovernook itself when it comes to a T, because that might be more effective to prevent people just running the ones on North Bittersweet regardless. Just a thought.
Yeah, so the resident lives on Bittersweet and maintains that people come around the curve on Clovernook as it comes into Bittersweet. And apparently sometimes, don't see that there are children playing in the area and whatnot. It just seems that if everyone has to stop and take a look around and see what's going on there, it would just be safer for the residents that live there. And I know that Charlie Imig took a look at it, and that's what he suggested as well. And I think it's a good idea just to make sure that, people take a look around and see what's going on.
I guess I would just say in response to Alderman Schmelzing's comment, we do have a number of these three-way T stops, but they tend to be at busier roads. Like I'm thinking of the couple on Glendale Avenue where people just speed right down Glendale and don't even stop at them. You're thinking of one at Green Tree, which is a busier road. This is right smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood where it's really not possible to go more than about 20 or 25 miles an hour on the street. So it really, and the neighbors will all become aware of it. I'm assuming you're going to publish this in your newsletter to your residents, to your
Right.
constituents.
The other thing is with Jean Nicolay closed, when school's in session, we have basically all the Nicolay students go through Lower Clovernook and through this area. And that's one of the primary concerns, is to make sure that there's, stop signs and that the kids stop for children that might be at play in this area.
Alderman Vukovic.
I would just like some really, I don't know if you can put extra lighting. I have one on what is that? Mohawk and Richter, and that house gets hit all the time. So I'm just saying, maybe even something else. I don't know what it is. It's just like, those are good, and I think it's a really good idea to have that for it, but for some reason, once people think they're three, one or the other thinks that they can just go without it. So I would try to, is there anything else you can do on top of that? I mean, it's just a suggestion because I've seen it just so much.
I mean, obviously we could try this and see if it, if this helps the situation,
On
if there's
top
something
of it.
else. Yeah.
All right. Any further questions, comments?
One follow-up. If this is going to move ahead because of that curve, you're definitely going to want to get some stop ahead signs, if not already planned, along the, what is that, heading eastbound? Because you're going to come around that corner and you're going to run into a stop sign and you're going to be slamming on your brakes if you don't know that's coming.
Yeah,
So
that's a great idea. And also just, because of some of the high school traffic, we put one of the speed signs that go down Elm Tree Drive just to try to discourage people from driving fast down that hill, because you're coming down that hill and it's pretty open there. So we wanted to have that one discouragement of speeding in that area too.
and if anything, it'll be preventing the cut through traffic in that direction more than anything else. So they'll probably be getting more traffic on what is that, Fairfield? I don't know this neighborhood as well. I'm sorry, but just, I just know I got a lot of feedback about why is there a stop sign on the top of Green Tree and Crestwood. And then I got complaints from both corner neighbors that people are just running the stop signs. And it's dangerous for that reason. So I'm just a little concerned, especially if you're coming around that corner and you don't know it's there. Someone might be expecting someone to stop and they just won't.
I'm thinking this also have a patrol at the beginning of the school year. Maybe.
We were in that neighborhood quite a bit at beginning of the next year, and we'll do it again next year too.
Okay.
So.
Alderman Doherty.
Same problem happens in Sunset and LaSalle. There's a four-way stop in the middle of a residential area. It might as well be yield signs. It's not good.
What I refer to as a stoptional. Stoptional. People slow down to about 10 miles an hour and then just keep going through. Yeah. You find that a lot in residential neighborhoods. We have a few of those stoptionals in Crestwood too. So. Yeah. All right. Can we get a motion then to approve the stop signs as well as the ordinance change?
So moved.
Thank you, Alderman Gelhardt. Is there a second? Second, by Alderman Vukovic. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
No? Okay, so 5 ayes and 1 no. All right, next is the approval of the 5-year capital improvement plan and review of the American Recovery Plan Act fund eligible projects. And I'll turn it over to the city administrator, Mr. Warwick.
Thank you, Mayor Kennedy. I will keep this high level. I will go through the documents that have been provided. I have the 2 experts that are sitting in the field that if you guys want to come up to the microphone for any questions or talk back and forth about any of the details on this, that would be helpful. So what was provided to everybody as in the past was the memo regarding the CIP plan as well as the 5-year CIP plan. A couple changes were made sort of just in relative to the organization of the categories for the items in the CIP plan, sort of change them around to try to encompass more of the overall picture of the capital improvements. As well as we kept in there the 2023 estimated year end. I felt like it was a good approach to try to provide the financial picture of where these projects ended up versus where we initially budgeted them. So you'll see the estimated year end, which is the EYE for 2023 included in the 5-year capital plan. So I'll run back through this, but in addition to the capital improvement plan, we also provided, since Chief Ferguson, myself and Charlie were reviewing a lot of the major capital costs for the city. A lot of them involved major IT projects, subscriptions, particularly the tasers and different website applications as well. So we felt it prudent to provide a separate document that relates to the amount of cost in total for some of the subscriptions for a lot of the police stuff. The tasers will now require a $35,000 annual payment, which will be in perpetuity to have the police department equipped with tasers. We'd gotten away with purchasing tasers and cartridges, but now in order to have them, maintain them, it'll be a $35,000 a year subscription. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but that includes an unlimited amount of tasers if they break, the cartridges, things like that through the life of the agreement.
So, one total cost.
Okay. So we provided those subscriptions and sort of computer replacements and squad car replacements and some software that's on here. I won't run through it unless people have any questions. And then we have the supplemental capital improvement plan, which provides a summary of the projects that are included in the 5-year plan, as well as potential projects that could be included. That sort of started because we were talking about the $1.5 million in ARPA funds that the city has available. So I was making a list of that. As while I was doing that, I was trying to put into play projects that the city council, and you guys are obviously welcome to add to this or remove from this as you see fit, of projects that could be added to the 5-year plan, just to try to provide a total list of what that would be. So the 5-year capital plan, I'll just run through some of the details real quick on this. I'm just going to highlight some of the major things on here. You know, the main thing I will highlight is, you know, we put together the new water main replacement fund and the new street resurfacing fund. If any questions can be specifically provided to Charlie and Mustafa. We have 2 big major items that are in the capital improvement program, which is the Silver Spring Rehabilitation Project, as well as the police department facility. I don't think those costs are specifically defined yet to really provide a hard number. My guess on both of them, they're probably shy $2 to $3 million on both of them. And the total cost for Silver Spring and the total allocation of what we're going to ask for the city of Milwaukee, because about 30% of it is in the city of Milwaukee, is up for determination on who's going to pay for what once we get moving on that. So these are sort of placeholders. I know they are in here for 24 and 25, so that time will come, and those things are coming sooner than later to determine that. One other change that I will just kind of highlight is, you know, we've caught up on our sidewalk replacements, and we had about $100,000 a year in there on sidewalk replacements. We reduced it to about $50,000 because we have caught up. We allocated that remaining $50,000 to pavement patching. We haven't really done much, if any, pavement patching. So if an area of a street is bad, we've replaced the street or just left it. This $50,000 will allow the city the opportunity to go through and carve out patches and sort of put in a patch to allow streets to last longer than they normally would. So that's one of the items that was changed in the 5-year capital plan. We've also updated the cost for the Port Washington, Jean Nicolay and the HISA projects. As you know, they all have come in well over than what we originally budgeted because of some of the inflationary items. So I'm gonna run through, unless there's any questions, you want me to open it up for discussions on the 5-year capital plan before I get to the supplemental plans?
I've got a question, and I don't know, maybe the same question that the Alderwoman who represents me in my district may be asking. But at the time we started the alley projects, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, we had 5 years worth of alleys we were going to do. I believe that 2 of them in Crestwood were slated to be this year's, but we chose not to do any alleys. I noticed that next year's project wasn't bumping. That was the same one that we saw 3 years ago. As the east of Elm Tree, north of Glendale, south of Silver Spring, north Mohawk to Navajo, Mohawk, Navajo, south of Silver Spring to the south terminus. And then there's undefined alley improvements are for future years. And I was wondering if the between Wingate and Brayburn and between Brayburn and Bethmar, and then just north of Silver Spring behind the veterinary hospital, if those 3 are going to be completed in like 25 or 26. I've actually had neighbors ask, they started doing the alleys and then they skipped hours and never did it. And I'm like, well, we didn't do any alleys this year. That's why. But we were actually slated, the one between Brayburn and Bethmar was slated for this year's project. And then we didn't bump it to next year. I see this as next year's project. So I'm just curious if the rest of those alleys in Crestwood are going to be completed.
Oh, good catch. We started our first alley project was 2020, so you're right on.
Yep.
And what we did was we took all of the alleys and ranked them by their condition at that time.
Yeah.
The first 3 years were the really bad ones, and now we're going to be in a period of almost 10 years that we are doing the middling ones. So they're not that different.
So the issue between Wingate and Brayburn and between Brayburn and Bethmar is we're both talking about a block and a half long. Both of those in which there is only one storm sewer grate in the middle of the block. So when we get heavy rainstorms, both alleys become creeks for a while, and because there's nowhere for the water to go.
Well, I can look into it.
Yeah.
One of the issues that we're facing is that we used to be able to do 2 mid-size alleys a year with the 350. And I had this discussion with Administrator Warwick that the plan is sort of, our original plan was a 13-year plan at a fixed cost of $350,000
Per year for 13
per
years.
year.
Right.
So in the 4 years that, well, now 5 coming up here, we're essentially doing 1 less alley every year for the same money. So that is not the reason why Brayburn and those alleys were switched. Most probably, I need to take a look at where the
Those were both slated for 2023. And then when we didn't do anything this year, I noticed this capital improvement plan didn't just bump everything out a year. It sort of skips those. It jumps to what was already slated for 2024.
I see what you
Yeah.
mean, and I will look into that.
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened. Either they got split
Okay.
or they got moved together. Either way, I will check into that. But just suffice it to know that the current situation is that one alley isn't, the remaining ones that we haven't done aren't really worse than each other to the naked eye. Because remember that until 2020, these were original.
Right. Need to move the microphone facing you, sorry.
We are expecting it to be done and done with it for decades. So I will look into that. I'm asking that you also consider whether if this is a thing you want to rather get done in 10 years instead of 13, 15, 16, then that's a conversation that this sort of topic brings.
Okay.
I will get back to you on the Crestwood alleys though.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to the Alderwoman for Crestwood.
That was one, but the other question I have, what is your determination of the dollar? What is the your starting point of dollars to consider to be into the CIP?
So to be honest with you, in the interest of time that we've had to put everything together and the evaluation of the revenue for the CIP, I have not altered the dollars much from what the previous administration have done. We need to really take a hard look at our long-range financial planning to determine exactly what the city can afford in terms of borrowing and capital improvements. For road resurfacing and for alleys, those were a hard number at $350,000 a piece. And then $1.5 million for water main. I have left those in place. I mean, I got here last year about this time, so those were the numbers that I inherited. And then in terms of this year, we haven't really dug deep into exactly the finances to know what these numbers really should be. These are sort of the numbers that were always set in stone. Correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie and Mustafa. These were the numbers that were provided to them on an annual basis for what we can afford for alleys, roads, and water mains.
And also you had talked about, subscriptions and software and making, life, beneficial for everyone in the city of the residents. And there's also functions, subscriptions that aren't necessarily infrastructure.
Yeah, the subscriptions that we provided are subscriptions necessary in order to function as the city to operate, like the tasers, the watch guard cameras, replacing computers on an annual basis, as well as things like that. So that's why we provided the subscription stuff on there, because those are the quote unquote necessary entities in order to sort of do the backbone necessary stuff.
Also with respect, because it's on my mind, because I actually walked into the door and hit our city clerk up. Elections next year, there's going to be 4 of them, so that's going to be a higher cost. Is that some of the stuff that's utilized for that? Is that also part of subscriptions?
So I don't know of any subscription for elections. Clerk and I have talked about some additional equipment for the 2024 elections. We haven't closed the loop on that yet. That will happen as we get closer to the budget time, but we have not had a closure on that discussion yet.
On my mind, because I know there's a up next season. Of course, it's important. So I just wanted to understand what you consider your bottom threshold for what you decide to put on the CIP as well. Thank you.
One,
As a comment to what the engineer said, I have there's some alleys in my district that are horrible, and maybe I'm not looking at them, but here's the problem with like spreading them out. I'd say 85 to 90% of my constituency has to use the alley for their garage. They don't have a driveway, they don't have, so these alleys, if they're screwed up and we don't have city parking, we have to use those. So I preface that 1 in 6 in that sense. We have to prioritize some of this alleyway because they can't get to their garages. They can't park on the street. So where do they go? I just want to push that. I see some of them are, but I know there's a couple other ones that are kind of bad. I don't know what kind of bad is in engineering. I'm just talking about as I drive down that and bump in.
you had a few down in the Glendale Avenue area that are pretty bad and they're not listed on here at all.
Right. And that's why I'm trying to understand, like, I understand that alleys may not be important to some parts of it because you don't have to use an alley. But here in most of my district, they have to use an alley. I have a driveway, so I don't have an alley, but halfway down the block, there is an alley that's connected to it. So I just want to know, can we look at that again or
Yeah, of
I don't
course.
know how that works. So
So we have a rating system that, and I don't think you have the entire I mean, my spreadsheet for alleys goes to 2035. Just as as a perspective on you because on all of this.
Right, but in 2020, when you originally presented them to us, you presented us with 5 years, which was 2020 to 2024.
I understand,
Right,
but
so I figured you
even
had
at
them,
that time, from day one, it was.
right, it was a 15-year
Yeah.
project. Okay.
Here's the thing, we used to be able to do 3 alleys, 3 sort of block-ish, or one long one and 2 stubbies. We're currently supplementing our budget by placing these impervious blocks in the centers, which means that the middle 5 feet of the alley, we don't get to pay for. And it also helps that, you know, our fees and all of the costs are sort of, you know, we're essentially getting a 10-15% discount on the thing. So that's part of the game too. But I believe that at this renewal rate, which is essentially determined by the number, right? These conversations, I understand that what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, I understand what Joanne is saying. We're not going to stop having these conversations just because there's always going to be more of them out there. And you can tell me do this. I mean, if you choose to do so and you agree amongst yourselves, you can just say, well, you know, do all of Crestwood in the next 5 years, all of the South Side, you know, in the next 4 years. You know, I mean, those things are also possible. We're, I guess I have to admit that our ranking is agnostic of what you just said, right? That's why, as part of this planning, you know, this is shared with you so that we can color our engineering judgment with respect to all of these discussions.
I have one other, how cost-wise, a alley, like to redo, you know,
By the foot, by the meter?
So well, we should just back of the envelope thinking, right? Assume $20 a square foot.
They're all what, about 12 feet wide,
They are 20
18.
wide
20 wide,
and
however long? Okay.
however long.
average
Resurface or reconstruct.
So those are, that's what we sort of.
What's the average on the length? Average.
Average. Average. Average is 18.
Is the width, correct?
You may want to make sure.
Give me a minute.
Looks like I've set it up.
So that we're asking the engine.
It's about 200 feet. It's about $90,000 an alley. And
That's kind of how I want.
you know, it's funny, we had this discussion earlier today, the 3 of us, on what's the most appropriate way to handle the alleys, because we actually drove around today, Charlie, myself, and we're looking at them and noticed just by driving on them, they are in generally good shape because they're concrete, they're not used very often. Is the approach to this is once every 5 years, do we borrow money and do the whole project, or do we do this a little bit at a time? Because the little bit at a time somewhat seems to cost more money of the engineer's time and the time to do all this. But there's a grant out there every year from MMSD to do this project. So we don't know what the true balancing act of the schedule for this, and we've blindly chosen $350,000. If we want to increase the program, we're probably going to need to increase that. But I was going to bring up here later, but I can talk about it now is, while we're talking about alleys, about road resurfacing. We're on a program to resurface every street about 116 years because we fund about $350,000 a year. To get on the average rotation of about how long a street lasts, we need to fund about $2 million per year at today's cost. If you add inflation to it, we need to put about $2.7 million into our streets on an annual basis to resurface them when they're supposed to. Fortunately, we're a little ahead of the track. I don't know if you saw in the supplemental packet, we put in a ranking of the streets generally as a percentage. Most of our streets are good or very good. I think that's about 95% of them are good or very good. And the percentage that are very good is 37% or higher. So there's that whole ranking system in there. And then the 4 and below, which are fair, I believe is the streets that we are doing this year. So, that's a big question up there is where does the funding need to go in order to ensure our streets and alleys are resurfaced in the appropriate amount of time? That other than the water utility, that's our biggest infrastructure that we have. That's what most people see, and in my opinion, we could probably bump up some of the funding on both of those.
I had a couple people in line. 5 and then number 2.
You almost stole my thunder. My question was, how does the ratings of the alleys compare to the streets? Are they all bundled together into the same rating system? They don't, okay. Is that because they're concrete primarily and they,
Oh,
no, they just,
The street ratings are a statewide criterion.
okay.
The alley, there's no such sort of statewide requirement for alley data collection. So those are our judgment.
We put them on the same like tier system or kind of the same style because
They
really,
are.
they are, okay, great.
They're
'Cause-
numerically, they're the same.
We
Okay,
have that, and I could put that together, in the interest of time of getting this out with all the additional
Understood, yeah,
information here. It's sort of alleys wasn't always on the
on
front
its
of my
own.
list, streets were,
Okay.
but we can certainly probably put that together pretty quickly and I can add it in here and send it out to everybody,
It-
just so
it-
everybody knows what the
It's not
rankings
a
are.
big deal, but when I just looked at the numbers in general, and I used to have alleys, but now I don't, so I guess I'm partial. But like if we're doing, let's just say $500,000 for roads and 350 for alleys, we're investing about 70% of our funds for those allocations into alleys versus roads, and there's a lot more roads. But if we're caught up on the roads and the alleys are falling apart because we haven't touched them, then, I think it'd just be good to put them all together so we feel the same way about it and we're objective. So that was just my one comment about that one line. I have other questions, but it's all on the next slide, so I'll refrain from going to those now.
I guess let's just get an inventory of the things. Let's put the math against it. And let's see where it takes us.
Yeah, we will definitely put that on there, and I didn't plan out roads beyond, or alleys, beyond 2024. I only put the 2024 list on there. We could certainly put together the 5-year plan like we do for roads for alleys that had typically not been done, but we can certainly plan those and put them on there as well
So we
too.
need to look at least that far out.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I think another criteria we could put is if people are, is there additional strain because there's no other way for them to get where they're going? That would be, to me, a tiebreaker anyway on an alley. But I think we just got to look at the inventory of it and let's see where we are.
Everyone's aware that Nicolay High School is undergoing massive renovations. The tennis courts, the football field, and then the backfields also, they're putting in new facilities. And as a result, very heavy equipment is traveling on Jean Nicolay Road and Daphne, which is the street just south of Nicolay. And those roads are being torn up. I mean, just really torn up. Is there any plan to fix those, and hopefully at the expense of DOT, for instance? I mean, I can tell you that the Daphne at the top of it is crumbling as we speak. So it's going to be one of those things that we'll have to take a look at.
Daphne at Jean Nicolay is pretty much gone. There's not much street left. There's more sand there than there is anything else. So, our approach is to talk to the high school about either a big patch or a replacement there. I know the state is resurfacing when they are done a portion of Jean Nicolay. Where's that at?
Well, Jean Nicolay Road will be reconstructed,
The whole portion of it.
the
Green Tree to Bender.
entire thing. End to end. To Bender to Green Tree, yeah. I mean, it's not a resurfacing, it's a reconstruction.
That's at the expense of DOT, is that right?
Yes,
DOT is
Yes.
paying for that, okay.
Yes.
All right, you finished?
Yeah.
Number one?
Just. I have to push back. Alderman Schmelzling, you said the alleys are only 70%. I suggest, you may be correct, then I suggest that we take the gift of the $300,000 for the billboards who are only in District 1 and put them towards the alleys then. That's what I would say, because it doesn't affect anybody else's district. The people in District 1 have to kind of live with those billboards. That's a $300,000 that's going to be given, then it should go into it. Then we could add some more to those alleys. If we're going to look at it that way, that's all.
I'm
I
just,
may respond.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying the full budget for the streets is just 30% more than the budget right now for the alleys in the whole city. That's what I was referring to. So that was, I don't know if that was misunderstood. So, okay.
And then you.
So, so I do have a question though about how the alleys got prioritized, because there's a couple of little tiny alleys that really are access to only one or two homes that were actually done in the Crestwood neighborhood. Right behind Hassel, which used to be a little engineering firm there at the corner of Bethmar and Silver Spring. There's a little alley behind it that was redone. There's access to only two homes, as opposed to some of the other ones that are access to as many as 30 or 40 homes. And so I guess, and then there's another one between Como Place and Dexter that has access, I think it's to 7 homes. So like some of these alleys, it looks like we looked at them and went, oh, well, those are little tiny ones. We can afford to do those. And we did them. And I guess I'm curious as to how those got prioritized when like one of them doesn't even cut all the way through, right? You turn onto Bethmar behind 2 houses and that's it.
so think of it this way. You can only afford to do 600 feet. Right?
Okay.
So if you pick the worst alley, like I'm looking at 2020, the Silver Spring, Stanton West Alley, that was 421. Right? Feet. Which means you have less than 200 feet of alley to do. So in that case, that other one, Crestwood, Kendall to south to the alley, that little stub, was picked because it was 1 right there, and 2, it was 122 feet. So in other words, you pick the one that you really need to get to, and you sort of scramble around so that it doesn't go over 350 and is kind of in the neighborhood, so that you're like the inconvenience isn't spread out too much. So that's how we group them. So first by length. So if you have one alley that's 600 feet, that's all you're doing. Right?
Right.
And if you can find 3 bad ones, like 3 bad ones at 200, that's great. Then you can, so most of the years, we've been able to do 3 segments of different lengths. But what I was saying before, that number is essentially in about 2-3 years, we're projecting that you're only doing about 400 feet of alleys with $350,000, which will make things a lot simpler because you're only doing 1 stretch, 1 block, and you go home. And so, but then, everything sort of starts lagging because then you have to come back and do the offshoots and all that. It's gonna get complicated as we go.
Okay. Alderman Doherty, go ahead.
I guess I'd just change our logic. There's nothing wrong with us. We did 350 for planning. We got to start planning on what needs to get done. Some years are going to be more than that. Some years maybe it could be less, but I think that logic was fine for the time. That's how we got where we are, but I'd recommend we change that.
Yeah, I agree that picking a fixed number for roads and for alleys is not the best planning perspective. It's to do what you need to do in order to keep up with the condition of what needs to be done to meet the goals of the city within the financial framework that you have generally available. And sometimes it might be more, sometimes it might be less. And I guess it's our job to plan that out for you. And we've done that for roads, but I think the ultimate thing of what we need to do the next 8 to 10 months is start to do some real financial planning to know exactly where these numbers can be, what they should be, and what the city can afford in terms of investing in the alleys and the streets on an annual basis.
Thank you.
I have one other question. So when you, on the supplemental part, I'm talking about I think you talk about the, some of the, what is it called? Drainage problems, and those are on some of those alleyways as well, correct?
That is
Like
correct.
the ones that I'm looking at is where I live by Iroquois Mohawk, and you have that little section there. And that's the alley and the section there. So when you do this, would you be doing that, resurfacing the alleys when you do this?
They occur at the same time. So the grant from MMSD pays for basically what is the middle 4 feet of the alley in order to put that porous surface in there to allow the drainage just to go into the entire area rather than every catch basin, which might be every 30 or 40 feet. So it allows for the better drainage of water and it reconstructs the alley. We do it all at the same time. Our cost in this is $350. And I believe the grant we asked MMSD is $240,000, which covers the middle 4 feet to create this porous surface to allow the better flow of drainage throughout the alleys that are reconstructed.
We have before us now we have a capital improvement plan for 5 years, but what we really need to make sure we're approving tonight is the 2024 portion. So that staff can then be prepared as they finish putting together the budget for next year. So can we get, I guess, are we all comfortable? Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the 2024 portion of the capital improvement plan? And then I've got a recommendation once we get you have a couple more questions? Okay, go ahead.
All right, real quick, I'll try to be quick on the projected revenue. Just why is there the bump in 2026 from like 600,000 to 900,000 under storm sewer, and then it drops down significantly? I'm just kind of curious why those are all over the place.
Because the number alters based on, it's linked to the expenses. So in 2026, I believe that's the purchase of a street sweeper. I'm not looking at the list right off the top of my head. But that is storm sewer. So it's probably the purchase of that. Then it goes down. The total is 2.6. So both the water utility, the storm sewer and the sanitary, those match the expenses in those years.
Okay, I was just confused on why it was revenue and not expenses. So, okay.
Yeah, it's basically just the revenue to match the expenses to let everyone know the revenue that's necessary to pay for those capital expenses in a year by year basis.
Okay, so it's not like we're
No.
making money on water utility or making money on storm
Nope.
sewer.
And you will see.
I thought it would be like off our water bills and such. Okay. So, and the grant, 4 million's the Silver Spring grant, we're thinking we're getting federal, and 600,000 is more of that in 2026 as well.
The $4 million is the grant from Gwen Moore's office. The
Okay.
$600,000 would need to be revenue that comes from either borrowing or city funds to pay for the portion in 2026. Or the 600,000, that's something else. That's
The Milwaukee County
my
contribution.
I
The
didn't, I looked at this, but I couldn't find that, so I just was curious.
Yeah, let me look at it and I'll.
Okay, that's fine. And then the last one here, so I'm assuming then the general fund operational, it looked like 11 million would be the debt issue to get revenues up to 15. So I'm guessing 2025, we're expecting to have capital expenses of 15 million. I thought it was 8 when I looked at the other slide, but I can take these things offline with you. I'm just trying to understand when we're going to have these big hits, because it goes from 5 million in 2024 to 15 and 2025.
Yeah, it's a huge hit that essentially accounts for both the police station construction and the Silver Spring project. You know, the chief and I had a conversation offline before this, talking about the police station construction and the affordability of both the Silver Spring project and the police station. And generally the same 2-year period probably isn't going to be a feasible thing for the city. And the $4 million grant for Silver Spring expires in 2026. So that's a project that doesn't have really any wiggle room, and the police station probably has some wiggle room. So that's something that would need some further definition as we get closer to the costs of exactly when those projects occur. But you are right. That's a lot of money. We threw those in from the timeline that we had the previous year. We moved in the Silver Spring project because of the grant we received. And we moved back to the police station project to 2025 with design here in 2024. As the year goes on, we're going to need to take a hard look when we do our financial planning. We know the real costs of what year and what do both of those projects look like.
Thank you. That helps just give me some perspective. Yeah, because you go from, 3.5 this year to 5 to 15 down to 7 and 2. So just stating maybe the obvious. Thank you.
All right. Now can we get a motion to approve the 2024 capital improvement plan?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Gelhardt. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Bailey. Any discussion? All right, before I call for a vote, what I'm going to recommend that we do is that each of the 6 alders, as well as the mayor, that we look at any projects that we'd like to see prioritized, and that we submit those to the city administrator within the next 30 days, so that we can see what the capital improvement, so we can see what the priorities are from the elected officials. Then those can be combined with the recommendations from Public Works and the engineer. And we can work on a long-term plan for capital improvements and what the actual costs are of the things that we submit. The Alderwoman. Speak in the microphone.
I don't know anything about, I just know if a road is bumped, so I don't know how I would do a capital plan or what I
Just send an email to Carl saying, I think these 3 streets need redone and these 5 alleys need redone, and just send them to him and he can add them in.
I think I'm very supportive of the mayor's idea. We need, on our end, we need additional perspectives, right? So, for example, when we do roads and water mains, we have a 2-part scoring system. So we color our water judgment with condition of the pavement that we observe, and we can vary the weight and see what happens. More roads, do you care for more roads or less water main breaks, kind of thing? And things of that and we also have, for example, for streets, we have a average daily traffic judgment. So 2 streets with the same number of water main breaks and the same pavement condition, the one with higher traffic ranks higher, right? Okay, so we can introduce, in fact, we should introduce another, maybe you call it social, maybe you call it priority list, whatever. It's okay. Our systems are built for adding scores, right? So if I gave you a list of, 22 alleys, well, you can score them. I said, score them from 1 to 10. 10 being the best and 1 being the worst, right? I mean, your judgment is just as valid as mine.
if you're just telling us to prioritize, I don't know. But I can get around a 1 through 10 and then just looking at my streets. And
Definitely.
the one thing that I would also ask is if you give me that list, find one that is perfect. I mean, the one that you think is perfect. So I have some judgment on what is the best one in my district. And then I can look in and rationalize, well, this one looks just like the one that he said is perfect. So I don't need to, but to me, it might be a 2, So I guess give us the best one in for me, give me the best one in my district. and then maybe even the worst one that you rank, and then I can see what the difference is and rank them.
I have a map of all the alleys in Glendale with each score, so 10 colors on it. So I'll just distribute that and we'll begin with that.
Okay.
Make
that's
sure
a
you
good
do it
start.
for all of us.
Oh, it's the entire city.
Okay, because I'm the same boat as Tamika. I'm not an engineer.
And real quick, while we're talking about the 2024 plan, the one thing that has not been defined for 2024 that we've done in 23 is the traffic calming. We have another $100,000 in there in the supplemental plan. We recommend 3 streets in here for traffic calming. And if you guys want to leave this for a later discussion, we certainly can, because now we're digging into the weeds in terms of exactly 2024 projects. We can leave $100,000 in there, plan for it in the budget, and then work on that as we go later.
I actually do have a couple of questions. One, so Alderman Vukovic raised the issue of the $300,000 for the electronic billboard. That was not listed as a projected revenue for the year, and so we don't have that money assigned. So she actually raises a really good point about how that money is going to be allocated. Second question is, beginning next year, we're going to start receiving 180% more state revenue, shared revenue. Have you started to put together plans for how you would project that additional revenue be spent? Would it be spent on operating expenses, or could it be divided that some of it goes towards some capital things? So I guess there's 2 questions there.
Yeah, the latter question first is, I think the story is yet to be told on what happens with the state revenue. We do have a budget gap in 2024. What it's going to look like or 2023, excuse me, what it's going to look like in 2024, I think will determine what happens with that additional state shared revenue. And then back to the question about the billboard revenue. We did allocate that in the budget. We did create a fund for economic development planning, rewriting the zoning code, as well as doing some target investment areas by creating drawings and trying to attract developers to those areas. We did allocate 150 of that 300 towards that, but certainly it's up to the city council of how you want to spend that money. None of it's been spent, of course.
Thank you. All right, we have a vote yet, but is there any final comments on the 2024 capital improvement plan and what our next steps are? All right, go and call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the capital improvement plan, at least the 2024 portion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. So as a follow-up now, each of us is going to submit to the city administrator things that we'd like to see in terms of capital improvements. I know we had also talked about the American Recovery Plan Act. We ended up allocating 1.5 million to water main replacement because that was one of the things that was coverable. It turns out the clawback was not in the final bill, so we now have that money available to reallocate to another purpose. And so I know Carl and I had talked a couple of weeks back about getting input from members of the council. So if we could each send things that we'd like to, actually, could you reach out to us with an email saying, these are the categories of things that are covered, and then we can respond back to you with suggestions that we'd like to see.
We'll definitely do that.
Okay.
There's definitely 3 categories for that, so they keep it pretty simple.
Okay,
Surprisingly.
perfect. All right, so that completes all of our business for tonight. We'll start with commission, committee, board, and staff reports. And this time I will start with Carl.
Thank you, Mayor. The only comment I have is met today with representatives from Brown Deer and Bayside regarding an agreement for assessment services. Both ourselves and Brown Deer are up for a new contract for assessment services. So we are going to go out for a joint bid or a joint RFP for assessment services. The goal is to try to eventually get all 7 North Shore communities on a similar term and a similar contract for those services. So that's something that might be coming back to the city council sometime in August or September for consideration.
Thank you. City attorney.
Thank you. I have,
All right, thank you. City clerk. Chief.
nothing to report.
Thank you. Number 1. Number 2.
Nothing to report tonight.
Number 3.
Board of Appeals met on June 28th to take an application from a resident in District 4 for a larger garage that he wanted to build to house a larger vehicle, and we approved that, and construction is underway.
All right, number 4.
Nothing to report.
Number 5.
Well, again, this year we didn't quite have the Goldilocks of the 4th of July. Last year it was too wet. This year it was too dry. So if anyone had been asking you, there was a pause in the fireworks while we put out a brush fire at Clutch Park.
Cool.
So
Additional fireworks.
I was glad nobody got hurt. That happened in prior years too, not nearly as exciting as, just a brush fire. So anyways, but I do have to say we made about, I think, $3,500 in revenue. I have to look at the exact numbers. Jessica pulled those together on ice cream and beer sales. So thank you to our volunteers. I also want to give a special kudos. I saw in the weekly update, Carl did as well, to Jessica for pulling pretty much all of it together with very limited volunteer and committee support this year. So she got it together. We had a great help from Heather, one of our volunteers from the food vendors. They all showed up this year, except for one, but that was, well, they broke their leg. I get that. I've been there. So, but again, just we pulled it off. And if there's any feedback for next year, please send it our way. And otherwise, thanks for coming. See you next year.
Real big thank you to you as well, too, for all the work you did.
Thank you, Alderman Schmelzer.
The children's concert was postponed to August 9th because of the air quality we had. And Wednesdays is coming, no fires, at least not in the park, the city park, sorry. And then this coming Wednesday is Latin Sound System. And the last I looked and listening to what the National Weather Service left a message for me is we're looking at possible downpours on Wednesday. So I'll keep an eye on that.
All right, and then my report, this morning, Baker Tilly presented its audit to MMSD. So I have the 2022 audit, if anybody's interested in seeing what I think the best government entity in the region in terms of its funding, the way in which, honestly, it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever done in government is being a part of the MMSD. And the finances are just top notch. So there's the audit, and then the 2022 comprehensive financial report is there. If anybody wants to see those, I'll make sure to leave those with the clerk in case anybody watches this video at some point and comes into City Hall and wants to see the MMSD stuff. We have it on file. The other thing was that today and one last thing, the dredge material management facility is in its final stages of engineering and will start being built. I'll pass this around if people want to see it. As you know, they are doing significant cleanup, or there will be significant cleanup over the next 10 to 15 years throughout the entire harbor into the Kinnick, the Milwaukee River, and all the sediment that is contaminated that comes from those areas will be placed in what's going to create essentially new parkland on the just north of the Port of Milwaukee. So this dredge materials management facility is where the contaminated stuff will go. Eventually, when it's done, they'll plant, wildflowers or whatever on it, and it can become a park. So that's the long-term plan on it. But that is underway. That is probably the biggest thing in terms of Milwaukee, the Milwaukee estuary being able to be delisted in the future as an area of concern by the EPA. The Clutch Fish Passage is one of the other items that will actually help to delist the area of concern. So that's moving forward as well. And then the last thing today was the ICC meeting. And one of the big things that happened today was we have in state law a couple years ago, they required that every county had to claim one public safety answering point. So one 911 dispatch for their county. What happened in the few counties where there were multiples, they all consolidated. Milwaukee County happens to have 11 911 dispatches. And so there was at first the thought that Milwaukee County would just do like everybody else, but we're special. So we pushed back, and what was written into the final legislation was essentially a requirement to consolidate everywhere in 71 counties, except in Milwaukee County, the ICC had to declare or name one PSAP for the county. And so there was significant, we performed a subcommittee, we had them study it. They came back with no recommendation because they said the county, the city of Milwaukee, or the Bayside 911 dispatch, all three of them were equally qualified. And so it left us with the ICC essentially having to make a political decision today. But today the vote was 10 votes for Bayside, 5 for county, 1 for the city of Milwaukee, and 2 that would basically say none of the above and just decline the funding. But because of the votes, there were 18 members present, 10 of them voted for Bayside. So Bayside is now going to be, the 911 dispatch that we are a part of, that we consolidated years ago, is really the model for what the county should eventually become. And we're the ones that are going to get the PSAP funding. And then Bayside's 911 dispatch will work with the other dispatches in the county to help them upgrade and integrate all of their computer software systems, all of their radio dispatch systems. But essentially, the model became Bayside. So I think we should be really proud of the work that we have done, consolidating so many things here in the North Shore, but particularly that when the state says you have to do a thing, and then for Milwaukee County to have to choose which one, all of our peers looked at us and said, the North Shore, you guys got your act together. That's what we want the rest of this to look like. And so I know county put up a really strong proposal that they could take what they have and expand it to consolidate everything in the county. But the city of Milwaukee didn't want to see that. They wanted to do it. And I think the next option would have been for Bayside to have it. So I was excited that vote went down the way it did. We had a bunch of Southside communities that voted with the North Shore communities. So we had votes with South Milwaukee and Cudahy and Greenfield that voted with the North Shore. So they like what we're doing up here. So there's a number of consolidation models actually taking place in the South Side right now, looking at things we've done in the North Shore. So I thought that was exciting that's the final resolution of what has been a year-long politically charged issue. But the final outcome today I thought was really positive. So. And I think, if you look at the way in which presentations were made, Bayside never approached anything with this contentious, it's our way or the highway. It was, we've been pulling people together and consolidating and collaborating for years. That's what we want to be able to help the rest of the county do. And that was the message that resonated with folks. So I was excited to see that happen today. So that concludes my report. If there's any questions. What? Yeah, it was good. Tomorrow morning, the North Shore Fire Department Board is not meeting, but the Finance Committee is meeting to look at a long-term capital plan for the fire department, and we'll be meeting right here in this room. So that concludes my report. I think Plan Commission's tomorrow night. So, okay, nothing else. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved. Second.
Moved by Doherty, seconded by Gelhard. All in favor of adjourning, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We stand adjourned.